On the 23rd of August, Netflix will be releasing Nightmare of the Wolf, an anime set in the world of Andrej Sapkowski's Witcher series. It's likely the first of many spin-offs, with the main character being Vesemir, Geralt of Rivia's mentor, who will appear in Season 2 of Netflix's The Witcher. We don't know much about the plot as of yet, but there are some general things we know from Netflix's advertising for this show, and also their approach to Season 1 of the primary show. The first thing to know going in is that you don't have to know anything about the Witcher franchise, because this is not an adaptation like the main show. The books are all set in relatively the same time period and follow Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri. And the games are unofficial sequels created by CD Projekt Red, which are not canon. This show is set long before the books, meaning you won't have to read them or play the games in order to understand this story. Geralt of Rivia might appear, but I doubt he'll be in this show unless it's renewed for a second season, since from the trailers it looks like this show is set before he and Vesemir met. Some might quickly dismiss this show creating an entirely new story, being far more loosely based on Sapkowski's work than the main show. However, I think this could be a really good thing. Season 1 of The Witcher was at times both really good and really bad at adapting the source material, varying from episode to episode. But unexpectedly, it shined when coming up with its own story. For those who don't know, I'm talking about Yennefer. You can figure out a general outline of her story from a few hints in the books, but almost everything that actually appeared in Season 1 wasn't in them. And many look to Yennefer's storyline as the strongest part of the first season. If that tracks over to Nightmare of the Wolf, we can expect a great story. As for the plot itself, this is set at least a century before The Witcher Season 1. Vesemir lived in a time when people were first beginning to hate witches. Witches played a crucial role in culling monsters which streamlined human settlement of the continent. But once their job was mostly done, fear of these dangerous mutants replaced whatever gratitude may have existed. Now there's a big spoiler that I'm going to talk about, but this was mentioned in The Witcher Season 1 and it's shown in the Season 2 trailer, so it's really no biggie. Nightmare of the Wolf will probably end with the sacking of Kaer Morhen by a violent mob of humans. So each story will likely be building in some way towards that climax. Also, both teaser trailers contain strong hints that this will quite heavily focus on vampires, which are very powerful monsters within the Witcher lore. For some context, Geralt, of all people, actively avoids fighting a higher vampire in the books because he's sure he'd lose. They're no joke. Werewolves also look to be playing a large role, appearing in both trailers, completing the other half of that fantasy trope. Now, I do have some concerns with this. We know from the bag of Witcher medallions in the trailer that someone or something is hunting the witches. A powerful vampire is one of the very few beings that could actually bring down this many. The thing is, I don't want Kaer Morhen sacked by vampires. The fact that it was sacked by humans ties to one of the biggest themes across the entire Witcher series, which is that humans suck. They're greedy, ungrateful, and have unreasonable fear and hatred of those different to them. These things often lead to systemic discrimination and horrific acts of violence. But if Kaer Morhen is sacked by some made-up monsters, that theme is completely undermined. It would be a direct insult to Andrej Sapkowski and Witcher fans. For the same reason, I hope the show doesn't blame the sacking of Kaer Morhen solely on Vesemir to increase his tragic backstory. We know from what Netflix has released that his past from before this show starts is important, but hopefully not in this way. Something I am open to is it being a side effect of his actions, and with Vesemir more being the match to light the fuse than the source of all animosity against witches. I think a great way to do it would be a parallel of the lesser evil short story. Geralt got involved in a conflict to prevent innocents from suffering, but in the end he discovered his actions had been pointless, with him slaughtering Renfri and her entire gang for nothing. This resulted in the town turning on him, with Geralt gaining the nickname Butcher of Blaviken, and a reputation which portrayed him as a vicious murderer. So here, Vesemir could get involved in a larger conflict between vampires and werewolves, or a concentrated effort from the vampires to fight the witches. But he only makes things worse, resulting in many innocent people dying, and the witches ultimately being blamed. Although the new trailer they released has eased my concerns somewhat, because we see that the struggle of non-humans is going to be a big deal, with Phil Evangel having a large role. Non-humans tend to cop more racial abuse than witches, so if that theme is front and center for their storyline, it probably will be for the sacking of Kaer Morhen as well. As for those behind the show, let's start with the good news. The animation is being done by Studio Mir, who animated The Legend of Korra, and their executive director even worked on Avatar: The Last Airbender. That means we're in for some stunning animation and vistas. As for the writing team, from what I could tell, the main writer is Bo DeMaio, although Lauren Schmidt-Hisrich is returning as the executive producer and overall showrunner as she did for The Witcher Season 1. Bo did work on The Witcher Season 1, but he's only credited for the Betrayer Moon episode. He may have worked on the other episodes as well, depending on the team's writing process, but this one was his baby. And it's reassuring since that episode was great, containing my favorite scene in the entire season. However, his previous work worries me. All he'd worked on before The Witcher was CW vampire shows like Vampire Diaries and The Originals.
Fuck.
The former is known for its focus on cringeworthy teen romance.
No! God! Please, no! No! No!
And since I've watched many of the DC Arrowverse shows and seen Riverdale reviews, I know that the CW has very low standards. This plus Lauren stating she likes training less experienced writers makes me wonder if she was just listing out the Witcher spin-offs and Bo called dibs on the Vampire Project. But hopefully there's nothing to worry about. At the very least, we know he's passionate about vampires, and so we'll probably give this story everything he's got. Alright, so that's pretty much everything I know about Nightmare of the Wolf. Personally, I'm actually more excited for this than Season 2 of The Witcher. So what about you? Are you keen to see Netflix's take on Vesemir, or concerned they're gonna ruin it? Let me know in the comments, and stay tuned for more Witcher content. Butcher of...